that paragraph, because when I first started doing the course, I was reading through the text and doing the workbook lessons at the same time. And I was just doing it because I thought you were supposed to do it. And then when I came to that paragraph, it seems like my whole world stopped and it explained everything. I can't explain what happened, but it moved me deeply. And I came to find out sometime later that it's a pretty popular part of the course with course teachers, and it's all laminated cards and everything.
All right. Well, thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
All right, so before we begin, let us take a moment to move back into the silence and begin with our opening prayer. I am here only to be truly helpful.
I am here only to be truly helpful.
I am here to represent him who sent me.
I am here to represent God who sent me.
I do not have to worry about what to say or what to do.
I do not have to worry about what to say or what to do.
For he who sent me will direct me.
Because God who sent me will direct me.
I am content to be wherever he wishes.
I am content to be wherever God wishes,
Knowing he goes there with me.
knowing God goes there with me.
I will be healed.
I will be healed
I'll let him teach me to heal.
as I let God teach me to heal.
Let God teach me to heal.
Amen.
Amen.
Okay. All right, so can everybody hear me okay?
Yes. I gotta go get my water.
Experiencing some technical difficulties, so I apologize. And Claudia, do me a favor and stay on top of muting and stuff like that. So if you have something to say, then of course unmute yourself. But if not, just keep yourself muted, please, because it helps stop the feedback and at a minimum. There's a lot of echoes when people aren't muted. So thank you. So we left off finishing up paragraph number 5. And so now we are moving into paragraph 6. So Bill, I don't mean to keep calling you out or anything like that, but would you mind, since you were the first person, would you mind reading paragraph 6 for me, please?
Okay, excuse me, would you remind me, I've been reading different parts of the book in different groups, so I need to be reminded of where we are.
Absolutely. We're on chapter 11, God of the Ego, and we're in the invitation to healing. What page is that?
198.
200. You said 198, Claudia? Is it 198?
Invitation to heal. Okay.
Paragraph 5.
198, sorry about that.
Thank you.
We're ready?
We are ready.
You will never rest until you know your function and fulfill it. For only in this can your will and your Father's be wholly joined. To have him is to be like him, for he has given himself to you. You who have God must be as God, for his function became yours with his gift. Invite this knowledge back into your mind and let nothing that obscures it enter. The guest whom God sent you will teach you how to do this if you but recognize who you are and are willing to let it grow. Your willingness need not be perfect because his is. If you will merely offer him a little place, he will lighten it so much that you will gladly let it be increased. And by this increase, you will begin to remember creation.
Okay. So Bill, what does that What does that say to you before I open this up to the group? What does that say to you?
You know, it's funny that I read this, and the first sentence kind of jumped at me, where it says, "You'll never rest until you know your function and fulfill it." And that word "function" is through the course in a lot of lessons and throughout, and it talks about us having a special function and what your function is. And we all have one. And in places it says, you know, forgiveness is our only function here. But it doesn't mean forgiveness like we're typically conditioned to believe forgiveness to be. But these days in my course studies, what I do, as I feel guided, I pick up a lesson or I read a couple pages or a section of the text. And this morning, what I did was I read the lesson that said, God, the gifts of God are entrusted to me. And I can't remember the name of it, but it talks about the gifts of God being entrusted. And what it basically talks about is, as we become to understand truth more, we're I hate to use word called on, but we're given opportunities to share that with everyone, to share that with others, you know, as we learn what truth is through Course in Miracles or whatever path. And I sat with that for a while, because it says in there, you know, if your fears will teach others that there's something to fear, and it was talking about a function. And I thought, you know, that's wonderful, you know, that, you know, we in other places, you know, it says in the Course, I am among the ministers of God, and I am a teacher of God, and salvation of the world depends on me, and things like that. And when I first read stuff like that, I said, it's not talking about me. This must be about somebody else who's going to read this book, you know? So anyway, I thought, well, that's wonderful. Because I love sharing whatever I've been taught, you know, whatever I've got that has helped me. So, and I get a call about an hour or so later from a friend. We've just become close through some situations the last handful of months. And he's about 10 or 15 years older than me. So he's in his upper 70s. And I've been taking him to doctor's appointments, basically. That's how we became close with each other. And the doctor where he had this surgery done was about 2 hours away from here. So we've spent 2 to 4 hours in the car with each other for weeks, you know, not weeks, but several times. And during that time, along with talking about everything else, I mean, there's no conversation I could be in that doesn't come back to something I've learned from A Course in Miracles and mentioning it, or God, or truth, or whatever, because everything kind of has its foundation in that. And he is just so interested in A Course in Miracles now, and he is just blown away by what he's learning and what he's reading and what we're talking about. He said today, he says, I can't believe it. He's like 74 years old. He says, I've spent my whole life seeing things, not even understanding what life is. So it was just funny that my lesson, and it talks about your function and, you know, being entrusted with the gifts of God. And the Course also says that, you know, those who are supposed to meet will meet. So as we learn this stuff, we get a wonderful gift to be able to give this gift to others, and just to see the excitement, enthusiasm, and to see someone who, not a lot of people are open to it, to a new teaching, and to see someone just, you know, someone who you might perceive to be past the age of really learning a whole lot when you're in your mid to upper 70s. He's just blown away. He feels like he's just seeing the world differently now. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if I went off on a tangent a little bit there, but when I saw that word function in my lesson from today about being essential, and it's just a beautiful way to see the way Spirit guides everything.
All right. Well, thank you, Bill, and thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm 74, and I've learned a lot. I've gone on a journey, and I mean, there's so much synchronicity with who you meet, who you come in contact with. It's just wonderful the way it plays out. And I always think of us as totally connected. When I look at people, I'm in many music organizations, and I try to see everybody as a spirit that's creating this music together as one. And so, like I said the other day, I said, it's like a wheel with spokes. We're all connected at the hub, but each of us has something that we're maybe good at that we can teach others about God through whatever we're good at, you know. The other thing that I mentioned too that really means a lot to me is the idea that that we're like waves on the ocean, and each individual wave then melts right into the ocean. It's all part of it. It's like I heard where we're not, God is not in us like a raisin is in a bun, but like the waves are, like the ocean is in the wave. So we're just, you know, and the ego, we've talked about this so much. So, you know, the ego steps in and say, okay, that's my ego. All right, let that go. Let's, you know, be open to what God has to say. And one more thing I'll say is that hearing this person speak that always asks God, you know, what shall I do? I've got a choice, but I really don't know what choice to make. So you ask, and sometimes I'm led the wrong way, and God says, well, I told you, but you didn't like what I said. So, you know, that kind of thing. Anyway, there's one other thing too that I've wondered about, because this is only the second time I've been with you folks. But in hearing from Bill, and someone else too, I guess you do, but every day I read, you know, the Course in Miracles, and I'm reading the lesson, and I'm reading the textbook. And does everyone do that too every day? I mean, you're into it every day. I guess if you nod yes, you are.
Mm-hmm. I am.
I'm just curious.
I do.
Okay, I'm through.
All right.
I'd like to add that it took a little bit, because, you know, I've been doing the course for many years, but it took a little bit. But I finally realized, I think for me, our function is to be God in every situation, in everything, to be God, because we're not just offspring or creations of God. We are God because we were created in its image and likeness. So when we show up, we're supposed to show up as God, to fully represent God, so that people see God and experience God through us.
All right. Thank you, Mother. Thank you, William. Thank you, Bill. Any other interpretations of paragraph 6? There's a lot of meat on that bone, so feel free to have at it. Does anything else show up to anybody that hasn't been mentioned yet, just from your perspective, from how you see it? Okay. What I get from you will rest, or you will never rest until you know your function and fulfill it. We're going to be already on the road of our function anyway. But not knowing that you are already fulfilling your function is not where we want to be. See, you're already fulfilling your function, to be honest with you. You're already in the will of God. See, it's only perceptual based in that you're thinking that you're not in the will of God. And so you're creating well, from that standpoint, a sense of lack, like you're not doing something good enough, or you're not, if you could just be better at this or be better at that, or if you could, if you were just a little bit nicer to your neighbor or something like that. And so we have all of these senses of lack, but you showed up exactly the way that you were supposed to show up. You just don't have a conscious realization of it because you're looking at things from a standpoint or a feeling of lack. The only difference that happens is that you actually come into a conscious realization of it. That's the only thing. So, as far as finding out what your function is, it's the same thing that brings you joy. Those same things that you find that actually bring you joy, real joy, those things are your function. And so those are the things that make your heart sing. Those things are your function. Now, we still all have a unilateral, as Bill was bringing out, function. Like, yes, forgiveness is all of our function, because something, we're all here, And so there is there is a function of relinquishing the fear, relinquishing the negativity, relinquishing the sense of unworthiness, relinquishing the sense that we're not good enough, or we're, or we're not doing things in the right way, or that there's something in any type of way that's wrong. That's all perceptual based. That all comes from our ego having us think that things are wrong, that, we're this or we're that. And so your will can never be different from God. So these are my interpretations of this. Does anybody have anything that they want to expound on what I just said?
I want to say that a question for you. So about our function, could that also be like our gifts, our talents, our purpose, or how are you defining function, just to kind of recap that?
I'm keeping it as general as possible, because our special functions are just that. They're special functions. And so, yes, your gifts, your talents, all of these things are all things that special aptitudes, so to speak, that were given to you for a higher purpose, or for a purpose of the entire collective sonship, which is all of us. So, but my opinion, one of the main challenges that we have before us is the challenge of, as far as looking at ourselves as not coming from a standpoint of lack or insufficiency or not enough. See, once we can get from that standpoint, there's a lot of healing that takes place from the inside out at that point. You begin to see the world differently at that point. So, and then you begin to see that you are in alignment with the Father. You are in alignment, your will is in alignment with the Father. It's only that thought, that thinking that your will is not in alignment with the Father, that thinking that there's something in some way, shape, form, or fashion that's not enough, that leads to a whole slew of erroneous perceptions that we all experience.
It's interesting, though, Stephen, because it says in the Course that we have only one function. And from my studies, that function is to show up as God in every aspect of our lives. Our purposes, our gifts, our talents, our skills, that's, something that we show up and we use as God as well. We use as God. We show up as God, and we we put out there our purposes, our gifts, our talents, our skills. But the Course says we have only one function, and that is to be God, to show up as God in every aspect of our lives and everywhere in the world.
Yeah, it's kind of what Bill was saying. It actually says a couple of different things. It actually gives us a lot of different functions. It gives us special functions, or it describes as special functions. It does give us the function as far as showing up, it does give us a function as far as forgiveness. So it does have a number of different things. So it can kind of get to be confusing. But yes, that is our function, to show up as God. It is our function to forgive, and we do have special gifts and aptitudes. So thank you, Mom.
But isn't forgiving showing up as God?
Right. I'm just saying all those things are in the Course, though. course says about forgiveness as being the function. It actually specifically says that. It does give us, say that we have special functions. It has a lot of different function-based types of things in there. So thank you. So yeah, it says all of those things.
Stephen, I also think that it's so, once you start, I find once you start absorbing the course, yeah, the whole condemnation thing is a real hindrance, any of that. And yet, it's really comes from, I guess, where it says, I'm just thinking of where it says that the ego needs humility, because it really does. But yet the spirit actually has the, this what, I forgot the word it uses, but once you start realizing that, I think that connection with it sort of slowly takes that condemnation away somehow. But on the other hand, it's not like when you're talking about, you see what I'm saying, when you're talking about how important it is to not attack ourselves, is so important, but yet we're not the ego is not the, the one to, idolize, or, it's what's in us, the altar within us, that becomes our, we start shifting to that other thought system. The other thought system is what gives us that, I think, that, anyway, I don't know, let's throw that in there.
Yeah, and the ego, when I first began to read A Course in Miracles, I looked at the ego as like, in a negative way. And even my attitude on the ego has changed as well. The ego is just a testing agent, is all it is. It's just something that tests us in this experience to, kind of push the limits for us, as far as, and once we actually, break past these tests and stuff like that, there's huge growth that we actually experience. So yeah, the ego will put in there, like, for example, you're this, you're that, but when we begin to overcome these thoughts of unworthiness, or these thoughts of lack or less than, and things like that, then, there's huge growth that we actually experience as a result of it. So, my opinion, even of the ego, has changed, in that the ego, still has a divine place in everything that we experience here.
Yeah, because maybe, it just occurred to me when you said that actually all the attack of the ego is really a kind of a grandiose thing. Even though it's attack, it's really like this whole, so it's so important just to come out of that ecosystem that's built on attack. And it just builds it, it feeds it. Every thought that does that feeds into that thought system. So when we start choosing the other thought system, it can dismantle. And but it's even though it's such a degrading, but anyway, it's maybe that's what I was thinking of. Thanks.
Yeah, I concur that the ego isn't necessarily a bad thing. We all need an ego to function in the world, and there are healthy egos. What happens, I think, to a lot of us is we have traumas or whatever life circumstances that create different kind of patterns in our ego, and that's where the healing needs to happen. But it is possible to have a healthy and strong ego. So I agree that ego has been judged and mislabeled, I think, frequently. It's not a bad thing. But if we do have wounding in the ego, that is what needs healing.
Yeah. And keep in mind, I'm not here to, these are just my own opinions. And so I honor everyone's opinion. If you believe that the ego is a bad thing, then I honor your belief in believing that the ego is a bad thing. These are just my opinions. So, as I'm, doing a lot of spiritual work, there's a lot of somebody. Claudia, can you mute? Can you mute? All right. So as I'm doing a lot of spiritual searching and things like that, there's a different understanding that I'm kind of getting from the ego, in that it's just a testing agent. If everything was all super easy for us, then there would be no growth. And I believe, I believe I heard you mention that, Mom, almost several Course in Miracles meetings ago. If everything was a piece of cake, there would be no growth. So the ego kind of makes it so that it's not a piece of cake, is how I'm putting it. It makes it so that there's a test, basically. So we have these little pop quizzes that come from our ego, okay? And as we overcome these pop quizzes, then we grow. So, from that respect, I mean, is the ego really a bad thing, when it's just basically a testing agent? So that's just chew on that. Anybody have any other aspect of paragraph 6 before we move on to paragraph 7 that you want to discuss? Any questions? You have to unmute yourself. Am I muted? Nope, I'm not muted. Sure what's going on.
Okay.
You've heard there's nothing good nor bad, only thinking makes it so. You ever heard that? There's nothing good nor bad, only thinking makes it so.
Yes.
Connected. Box mode.
So if thinking makes it so, you have control over your thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm connecting that with why the ego is not necessarily bad. It's what you give into, just like in this world, how much you listen to the noise, I'm going to call it, in the news, the noise in the news. I was speaking to somebody late this afternoon who was watching the news. And I told her I don't watch the news. I don't know how I know what's going on, but I don't watch the news. It comes from everywhere. And she said, I'm so depressed. What are you watching? And it's not only what you watch, it's what you think about or what you believe when hearing the noise. And so I'm not putting her down. Everybody's watching the news. I understand that everybody wants to know what's going on, but there's nothing good or bad, only thinking makes it so. That's a very tough concept to absorb in this day. Very tough. But keeping your mind, I have a girlfriend that says, I mind my mind.
Yeah, I understand. I
No,
completely understand.
there's a lesson 281 that says, I can be hurt by nothing but my thoughts. Kind of dovetails with the
I love it.
In our spirit group, we're talking about the eye of the storm, and it says, no one is against you. No one, nothing is against you. It's your perception, it's your inner perception that is clouding the experience that you're having. And if you can become more of an observer in conflict, then you'll see it more clearly that where the stuff is coming from. No one is against you.
Yep. It's true.
Yeah, that's from Course in Miracles. Nothing and no one is against you.
Yep.
I look at the news as God giving me my prayer list each day.
Right.
I love it.
So if you are able to, you know, and again, sometimes you just really want to limit the amount of news that you get. I talked about this in a short 15-minute piece where I was saying the news is just a business. It's a business, and their job is to, report the news in the manner in which it's going to bring the most viewers. And the manner in which it brings the most viewers is the scariest type of way that you can actually report it. So just understand that the news is just a business like any other business. And any type of business is going to want to, have more viewers. And that's just how it is. But you have to censor that information that comes. You have to be the guide as far as when it's going to get to be so much negative information that it's going to impact your thoughts negatively. So just keep that in mind. I'm not here to tell you don't watch the news. I'm just here to tell you to censor the amount of information that comes into your consciousness. So do we have any other discussions on paragraph 6 before we move on?
Well, I just want to share that I only watch Good Morning America because they give it to me with a spoonful of sugar.
Okay. All right. So there's an idea. That's, might want to check out Good Morning America. Thank you, Mother. Anything on paragraph 6? Everybody ready to move on to paragraph 7?
Yes.
All right. Claudia, who's next?
And they move. So who wants to read?
I believe Sandra came on next. I can remember from memory. I believe she was on.
Yeah, she signed in, login.
Came on after.
I'll read. I'm happy to read.
Okay.
Would you be hostage to the ego or host to God? You will accept only whom you invite. You are free to determine who shall be your guest and how long he shall remain with you. Yet, this is not real freedom, for it still depends on how you see it. The Holy Spirit is there, although he cannot help you without your invitation. And the ego is nothing, whether you invite it in or not. Real freedom depends on welcoming reality, and of your guests, only the Holy Spirit is real. Know then who abides with you merely by recognizing what is there already, and do not be satisfied with imaginary comforters, for the comforter of God is in you.
Amen.
Mm-hmm.
Sandy, what speaks to you in that paragraph?
Yeah, well, for me, it kind of goes back to what I was just saying, that by not watching the news, I'm not, let's see, let me say it a different way, that you can watch the news and still be with the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
Okay, and I'm not there yet. So I choose to kind of avoid it. But yeah, I mean, when you are truly with the Holy Spirit, nothing shakes your world. Nothing shakes your world. So I'm a work in progress.
As are we all. As are we all.
So that's what I get from that. And the ego is nothing, it says. Whether you invite it in or not, it is nothing.
Amen.
But that has to do with your ability to remember who you are and that the Holy Spirit is always with you. Because what was that lesson, Bill? Nothing can hurt you.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm a work in progress.
Right. As are we all. Thank you so much, Sandy. And is that Melanie who I see on? Oh my God. Hey, Melanie, how you doing? I think you're muted.
I am. Hi, everyone.
I
Good
know.
to see some new faces too.
We're great. We're glad to have you with us.
Thank you.
All right. So, turning that up, opening this up to the group. What do you guys think of paragraph 7?
That first sentence, would you be hostage to the ego or host to God? That reminds me of that Native American story about which wolf are you going to feed inside of you? Are you going to feed the anger, or are you going to feed the other wolf that's the good one, right? You know what I'm talking about, Sheila, right?
Yes, yes.
I love that story.
I love it.
So that was it. That's what that reminded me of.
Okay.
So it's kind of like saying, choose you this day which wolf you will serve, right? Which wolf you will feed. Sorry. Choose you this day which wolf you will feed.
Yeah, I know what you meant. Yeah, exactly.
So in the recovery community, there's a story about a snake. Some of you have probably heard this. And the guy is walking down the road and he encounters a snake. And the snake says, pick me up. The snake's stuck or something. And he says, pick me up, help me out. And he said, no, you'll bite me. He said, oh, I won't bite you. And he picks him up. And he bites him. He said, I thought you said you wouldn't bite me. And, just who are you going to believe? Yeah.
Doesn't the snake say, well, I'm a snake?
Oh, right. Sorry. I didn't finish the story. He said, well, you knew who I was when you picked me up. That speaks volumes about what's going on in our world right now.
Yes.
I will.
Yeah. So, any other? It's about 7. Looks like somebody was that you, Bill?
Yeah, I forget who said it, but it said, as far as like watching the news goes, if you want to learn the truth, you can't listen to somebody who doesn't know it. And that's what you're doing when you're watching the news. You're listening to voices of the world that don't know the truth, what the truth is. You're listening to a voice that is contained within an illusion, a deluded mind within an illusion, who doesn't know reality. I always say, if I want to know the truth of what's going on in the world, I find it in A Course in Miracles, and there's other teachings of truth, but you're not going to find, you can't learn the truth, as with a capital T, by listening to voices who don't know what it is.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
But I can learn what my congregants are in need of, what they are hearing that's causing them fear and torture and so forth. And I can post or call or speak on how to move beyond what they are seeing. As ministers, we really have to kind of be up with what our congregants are listening to.
And if you're not a minister, if you don't feel comfortable with it, then that's okay too.
Absolutely.
If you are a minister, you have to understand that there are certain people that have received a lot of training to be able to deal with that amount of negativity, and then simply just turn it into a prayer list. Mm-hmm. And if that is not you, you do not have to try to be like a minister like Reverend Sheila. Okay, you can just be exactly how you are, and just, if you don't want to watch the news, then don't watch the news. Both processes are okay. Whether you choose as a prayer list, or whether you choose not to because you want to censor the information, either one are just fine.
I think the thing to remember is not to be hostage to the news.
Amen.
Not to be hostage to the noise. I love what Sandra said and called it the noise, because it is. There's a lot of noise coming at us right now. And a lot of people are having trouble sleeping. And that's what I think it is. We have so much coming at us at once. And we have to decide, do we want to be hostage to the noise, to the ego? And we have a choice here. And I'm so glad that I'm here tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you, Melanie.
I think for me, it's the sheer amount of news that we get. Some of you will remember that there was a time when we didn't have a 24/7 news cycle, and so anyway, it's the sheer volume of all this noise that's going on all the time that you can't even hear yourself think. I can't hear myself think sometimes.
And I think not just about the news, it's also all the social media that we didn't have before, So, and I mean, it's all kind of information, maybe negative, maybe positive, but it's a lot, sometimes it's a lot. And so we have kind of like, I think that we might, like take our times to detach, to just go with it, because there is a lot of noise, as you say, Sandy.
Do you all find that it appears that people are somewhat addicted to the news? I mean, I only watch Good Morning America. I don't watch anything else. That's it for me. But do you find that people appear to be somewhat addicted to the news?
I think so. And I've often wondered if it's a form of escapism.
Mm.
Like, hey, better you than me kind of thing. I don't know if that's true, but I wonder about that.
Mm.
Well, it's kind of the same thing when you with social media too. And Claudia brought up social media, but you get the same amount of news on social media, and maybe that's also some escapism. And honestly, what I advocate is just unplugging every once in a while. Just unplug. I mean, read a book or something, or just meditate. Or do something different. Go for a walk. Just unplug from all of the technology and the news and all that, and go sit in the backyard or something, or just anything other than the same thing. Mix it up. Moses, I see you're Moses in the backyard.
I think
in my backyard. If I may say, I also want to say the other side of it also is a question for spiritual junkies, that they look more outside for all the spiritual access that they want to have, whereas at some given point we need to go more inside and get our answers inside, rather than also be spiritual junkies, not just news junk. I mean, it's way better than being a news junkie, but at the same time to kind of keep ourselves. I mean, I'm saying this because I am. There are times that I find myself doing that, and I do have friends that we are into these kind of a work as we are here, and I notice a lot of times we also get pulled more into becoming spiritual junkies, which also may not serve us as much, because we are not tapping to the message that it's within us. We are looking for that message still outside in somebody else's book, in somebody else's YouTube, and outside, which it still is a lot better than being a news junkie, but it's also, I think the other side of it is also something to be aware of.
Thank you, Moj. Thank you, Moj. And it's good to see you.
I was going to say that I think the stillness, which is what the course is mostly leads us to, because our mind, the way it is in the ego world, it's not actually thinking at all. It's just basically noise. So the more we can get still, without we can enter that other thought system. It's very important to be able to start becoming still. And like you were saying, Moj, and because then we can actually hear the other, hear something else when we're, so this time actually is an opportunity to develop more stillness, because you don't hear, I don't know where you're at, but like the whole, there's a lot of opportunity to have more stillness in our mind right now. So
All right, I agree.
Yeah, Thich Nhat Hanh is a great person to listen to. He's no longer with us, but he has a lot of meditations that are great. Just talks about breathing. Breathe in and breathe. When you breathe out, you smile, and it's really nice. And I've been on some of his meditations, so it's good, worth looking into. As many YouTubes out there, and he had a great with the Oprah Winfrey. There was a great interview with her too. It's out there.
Okay.
I wanted to just add something real quick, if you don't mind. It was just perfect what was just shared about the stillness, because one of my random lessons that I was led to a few days ago, and it had, I've always had that thing, like I could start watching the news and start buying into that thought system that's coming from, and this line in this lesson that I had is, let me be still and listen to the truth. And this couple sentences were just hit me, and it says, be not afraid today to circumvent the voices of the world. Walk lightly past their meaningless persuasion. Hear them not. Be still today and listen to the truth. And then it goes on and on. But that, like when I saw that, walk lightly past their meaningless persuasion, if I direct my attention toward those voices that it says, the voices of the world, as much as I know this stuff, I'll find myself starting to get persuaded into believing their version of truth, or what really is true.
Where did you read that, Bill?
It's lesson 106, and that what I just read was from paragraph 3 in lesson 106.
Lesson 1 of Course in Miracles?
That's
Yes, lesson 106.
106. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So
there are other voices out there too, that are of peace. This afternoon, I was leaving home. I live in a very small neighborhood where all the streets are cul-de-sacs. And I was leaving home, and there were 3 little boys down the street who were playing basketball. Little tykes, little, they were probably 10. And they had their basketball thing, whatever you'll call that, the net and everything up, and they were just giggling and just having such a good time. And then a smaller child approached them on a scooter, and they, he didn't stop, but he just kind of looked at them almost as if, can I play? And they just welcomed him, and they just all laughed. And I said, that is the sound of God. And I stopped for a while and just watched them. I didn't want to stay too long. I didn't want their parents to come out and wonder, what I was doing. But I just sat there and just watched them running around and playing and laughing. And I said, you know what? God is there. That's where God is. It was wonderful. So there are other voices. That was my.
Yeah, that you have to be like a child to enter the kingdom of God.
Absolutely.
It's great.
Any other comments?
Yeah, having an ego is a really serious thing. It's really not all that fun after a while, I find. It's really it doesn't have, it's really serious, very easy to get serious as an ego and have no playful, no play, no innocence. And it's very, strangulates life. So,
All right. So we are going to get ready to go to the next part that finishes the invitation to healing. Before we go to the next part, I just want you all to imagine. I want you all to imagine something. You know, no reason to comment on it. But imagine that the way you are right now is perfect. And the only thing that's preventing you from seeing that there is nothing that needs to change whatsoever about you is your perception of you. So I just want you to imagine that all the things that you ascribe to yourself as, you know, less than perfect, any type of less than trait, you know what they are. I don't need to know what they are. No one needs to know what they are. You know what they are. I want you to imagine that those things are actually what God needs for you, and you are the only one who has ascribed a negative value to it. So I just want you to imagine that. Just imagine it. This is not, I'm not wanting to spark a debate with your ego, as far as someone to prove to me that, or tell me that, this is a flaw or something like that. I just want you to imagine that you're actually literally perfect. Not perfect just in absolute, but perfect right now in the relative. And that there are aspects of you that you have labeled as not perfect that somebody like me actually needs. And when you're not showing those aspects of you that you've put a negative value on, I can't heal. Somebody like me that would have otherwise observed you and healed, I'm not able to do that because it requires your cooperation. I just want you to imagine that. I'm not here to convince you of anything, but I just want you to use your imagination. Okay?
Amen.
And
preach, Rev.
Wasn't trying to preach. I'll get off my soapbox if that's
No,
not.
I'm saying amen.
Thank you, Mom. I just want everybody just to use your own imagination. Just imagine.
It's perfect. Perfect. Right on time.
Thank you, Mom. So let's go ahead and move on to the next paragraph and go ahead and take our break early. And
May I ask Bill, sorry about that. May I ask Bill, what was that lesson from? The nothing hurts us except our thoughts?
Bill, you're on mute.
I think it was 291.
All right. So we're going to take a break, 8-minute break. Be back in 8 minutes. Restroom break, water break, coffee break, snack break, whatever kind of break you want to do. And we'll be back in 8 minutes. Yeah. Okay. All right. There's a ding sound, whatever. I don't know where that's coming from.
Time to come back.
Oh, okay. I was wondering what that dinging sound was. I was like, okay. Okay.
It means time to come back.
Right. All right. Okay, I'm good to go. Got some snacks here. Got some water. Okay. There were a couple of emails that I received where people needed the Zoom link, so I had to send it to them. All right. So we are now moving into from darkness to light.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, from darkness to light. Let's see how many paragraphs you got on this. You got 8 paragraphs, so we should be able to get a couple of them done tonight. Claudia, who was next? I know they moved around, but who was next on our thing?
So almost at the same time. So Rosie, you wanna read? I don't hear you. Hold on, you're mute.
All right, there we go. Sorry. When you are weary, remember you have hurt yourself. Your comforter will rest you, but you cannot. You do not know how, for if you did, you could never have grown weary. Unless you hurt yourself, you could never suffer in any way, for that is not God's will for his son. Pain is not of him, for he knows no attack, and his peace surrounds you silently. God is very quiet, for there is no conflict in him. Conflict is the root of all evil, for being blind, it does not see whom it attacks. Yet it always attacks the Son of God, and the Son of God is you.
So what do you take from that paragraph?
Me?
Yeah, you, Rosie.
Yeah, from my perspective, this is about being aware of our connection with God. And when we are not aligned or in connection, that's when we are feeling weary or suffering or having any conflicts, and when we don't have any comfort. But all the opposite of that is when we are connected with God. That's how I'm interpreting it, at least.
Okay, all right, sounds good. I like it. So I'm opening that up to the group. Any other interpretations as well? Anybody?
Maybe I could summarize it quickly by saying, when we're not aware of our connection with God, we suffer. I guess that's an even quicker way to summarize it.
I like it.
I'd like some discussion about, well, except now that I'm saying that, it's not real, but some discussion about what's going on, this pandemic, and this idea of the not being close to God. Since it's worldwide, I guess the question is that a symptom of how much we have gone toward evil, just in general. And does that include the innocents as well, the children who are suffering from this? Any discussion on that?
Okay. So does anybody have any answers for Sandra? as far as whether this is, and I make sure I don't take your words out of context. So, Sandra, I was kind of interpreting it like you were saying, like, is this some sort of when I heard you use the word evil, like we're experiencing this because of am I understanding you correctly when you saying that we're experiencing this because of doing something wrong or something like that? Is that
No. In the bigger context, we can speak about being separate from God personally. But in the bigger context of this worldwide spread of, of disease, we don't believe in disease, but there's this, something is happening in our world. Personally, we can work on our relationship with God. But what does this mean for the bigger, the collective, including children? Reverend Sheila looks like she wants to talk about that. I can't wait.
Yeah.
Well,
Move to
you
your left.
know that all of this is energy, right? All of us and all of this and everything in existence is energy. And over recent years, and not even recent years, there has been a long-term rise in the energy of fear and anger and attack. Now, love brings love, but fear brings fear. Attack brings attack. And so the mass consciousness for a number of years has reached this, the consciousness has reached a pandemic level. Mm-hmm. And if you understand consciousness, then you will understand that when it reaches a certain a critical mass, it has to it creates something that will combust, so to speak. And what has happened is that we are being brought back to who we truly are. Breakdown always precedes breakthrough. And so there has been a breakdown in the flow of love and peace and alignment with God and each other. And so it is not really meant to destroy us. And if you think of souls as, there are some souls who volunteer to play a role for us in something that will bring us back into our right mind. And I believe that's what this is about. We come together in times of challenge and chaos and destruction. People begin to rise up to the truth of their being. And so collectively, we created something to break everything down so that we could break through to the truth of our being. And that is happening. People are helping people. People are being more considerate. There are a few that are acting out, but for the most part, people are giving, people are loving, and people are getting back into a consciousness of peace and love. And sometimes we just have to reach that critical mass and have that breakdown so that we can break through. And I believe with all my heart, that's what's been going on. And Stephen and Claudia and others can tell you, I've been talking about this for some time because I'm empathic and I've been feeling this. And I've been saying something is getting ready to break through. Mm-hmm. And that's what's happening. This breakdown happened so that we could break through. And think of our beautiful brothers and sisters who volunteered to exit in order to show us what was going on so that we could heal and we could stand for something greater than what we were standing for before. That's what I believe.
Can I share something to support what Reverend Sheila just said? I feel as if, because I know exactly where her mind is on this, that whatever happens on an individual level is happening in the collective consciousness. So there has been a huge surgence of people who are individually waking up, and part of the process of waking up are these moments of ups and downs and highs and lows and a dark night of the soul. Rosie and I were talking about that today, a dark night of the soul collectively. Yes. So we can, as a collective, step into that space of who we truly, truly are. Yes. And so there have been, like I think you mentioned sometime last week, maybe, Reverend Sheila, we have a little whisper in the air, then we get a tap on the shoulder, yes. Then we get a yell, and then we get a 2x4. Yes. This is a 2x4 collectively for us all to wake, for the humanity to wake up. And so there have been some taps and whispers, Black Lives Matter, Me Too movement, the school shootings were all events that were waking people up. But then they needed something, a global 2x4 to make people stop and think and look at it, because there are people that have never considered anything before until this moment, and they're all looking at it and they're feeling something is happening. So it's like it's going to be an interesting ride to watch, and I think those of us who are in these kind of groups are very important, because we are holding this energy to help the rest of humanity to shift into its truthful self. That's just what I've been feeling. And I'm going to go away now because my ears have been going on and off all night.
And there is no death, my beloveds. We just change from one mode into another, but there is no death. Yes, you cannot see these people, and perhaps some loved ones made their transition but there is no death. There is no death. But think of these amazing, powerful brothers and sisters who, as souls, volunteered to play these roles for our awakening. And so I know how this feels, but it's a beautiful thing.
I tell everybody, we're not our body. We are a spirit in our body.
Yes,
and our body will die. We're not our body, because our body just goes to nothing. Like Christ, Jesus said, he said, I share my mind with you, not my body.
Yes. Yes.
So some people, they don't believe it. I tell them, I said, this is the way I believe. I believe this is true.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I've often thought that just what you're saying, that people volunteer, and I think, wow. Yeah.
And believe it or not, this is a beautiful thing that's happening. That's my son's favorite phrase. It's a beautiful thing.
Yep.
Well, like the beginning of the course, it, really shows how much it tries to help us see that we really can't interpret correctly, That's what it's all based on, is that our, the way we perceive our judgment is all based on fear. So we can't really perceive, once you see how faulty that is, and how it's not in our best interest, how much of it is, to be weary of whatever, to watch, like what voice you're listening to, because, even asking that question is sort of, gonna maybe lead in the direction that I definitely don't want to go in myself, because it's really, my mission is to align with God's will, and God's really in charge of everything. It's not my job to understand all these, unless I'm given it. Maybe I'll be given it, but it's really not my job. And maybe it's, who knows what the interpretation is. Just because I interpret it as negative, it doesn't mean everybody else is interpreting. Maybe we really don't understand what the meaning of any of it is. That's a possibility too. Who knows, good or bad? We have so much at this time in the world. If you think about how much we have, it's mind-boggling, like the resources that we can be here and not work.
Yes.
I don't know, maybe, I don't know that we really can even understand why it's all happening, and children, and, it's sort of a rabbit hole, I think, but to torture ourselves, like, we're not God.
No.
And we didn't make ourselves the truth. And so to try to come under its authority, to try to come under to surrender to something higher that it will tell us.
Yeah. And what does it say at the beginning of the course? It says, nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists.
Mm-hmm.
Either we believe this, or we all need to get off this call, off this thing right now, and just never pick up the Course in Miracles again.
Right. And
we're studying it for nothing. If we don't get that, then we're studying it for nothing.
That is the most reassuring statement of this entire book, because the end is, therein lies the peace of God. And once you know what is real, and that it cannot be threatened, and once you can identify what is not real and it does not exist, it's like, okay, everything falls into place.
Absolutely.
And this whole book is about identifying what is real and what is not real.
Yes.
And I think we need each other, because we all are in different, we're helping each other to, it's not by ourselves that we learn even, we need each other to actually get this. So it's.
I found you folks. There was no one around me. I talked to other people. No, they weren't interested. They looked at the Course in Miracles. It wasn't for them and all that kind of thing. But so I'm glad I found you folks.
We're glad we found you.
Yeah, thank you.
Sheila, there's a part in the course that reminded me of what you just said. In chapter 22, it says, "This course will be believed entirely or not at all.
Yes.
It is wholly true or wholly false, and cannot be but partially believed."
Yes.
And the Course in Miracles says things like, "All things work together for good. There's no exceptions, except in the ego's judgment."
Yes.
That one sentence, and realize this is the truth of our being. You might not even read the rest of the book, because that's the message of the book.
It's pretty simple.
It is.
You keep going over and over and over. It's like, okay, you can get it back time.
Something big to chew on.
Oh. And also to what Sheila was Reverend Sheila was saying earlier, and I think the poet Rumi summarized it very well. He said that sometimes demolitions are actually renovations. And so this demolition that we're going through is an opportunity to renovate our lives. I think that's what you were saying earlier, right, Reverend Gautreaux?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And the idea is, well, what materials am I going to use to rebuild my life? Because I'm in a career sort of transition right now, and it was brought on by this COVID. So I'm having to retool a few things. So it's not easy, but that awareness came out when this happened. So I'm trying to renovate right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we bring in the children. People do this a lot. Children are not really children. they're appearing as children. They are full souls, just like the rest of us. And the children, and everybody will do that. And some of those children are older souls than the rest of us.
Mhm. That's a good point. Thank you, Reverend Sheila. That's a really good point. I also want to refer back to what Deb said about there have been hints of this for years. Some of you are old enough to remember the age of Aquarius. You know, the Aquarians stand for brotherhood. And in a relatively short period of time, a couple of decades, we're communicating with people instantly across the globe. I play bridge, excuse me, online, and I have friends in Bulgaria. I mean, that's impossible, or I would have said it's impossible, you know, not that long ago. I remember, and I'm going to maybe dating myself, when my son got his first computer, and I said, well, where are the people? I don't get it. Where are they? You're talking, what do you mean? So, you know, that idea, Deb, that you brought up, that the world is getting smaller and we're connecting with one another quite a bit more. But Reverend Sheila, that idea of children being old souls was very helpful. Thank you. That was very helpful.
Do you remember hearing about indigo children?
Yes.
Indigo children. Yeah, I remember I read a lot about them and how they communicate telepathically, and they have a whole web of communication, and they're old souls, I'm sure.
And a prophet said about a little less than 20 years ago that no new souls were coming in, that they were coming to prepare us. So in the last 20 years, 20 or 25 years, I can't remember exactly, no new souls, only the oldest of souls were coming in. And that there would be many of them that were angry about it. And you notice the children who've been shooting up their schools and things like that. They probably represented some of the ones that were not happy about having to come back here. And thank you all for allowing me to speak this.
I read today somewhere that, have you noticed there haven't been any shootings, there've been individual crimes, but there haven't been any mass shootings. We're all kind of, you know, something else is going on. There is something else going on.
Yes.
If I may share, I lost my grandma almost 30 years ago. And the fact that she was back home in Iran, to this day, I just always assumed she's still back there and I'm here. And whenever I would like to communicate with her, I would just communicate with her. And then I lost my dad in November last year. So it's like 5 months. And I'm very close with my dad. So I would even miss him if I would not see him, like it would be 2 days or 3 days that we don't see each other. So I still miss him that same way that, you know, like I don't get to see him. However, I think it was in Ways of Mastery book that I read this, that it's like we don't mourn when somebody leaves a room to go to the other room. And why do we mourn? Especially like my culture, people beat themselves up when somebody dies or whatnot. But it's like we don't mourn when somebody leaves from one room to another. So that worked out very good with me, because I was still thinking the same thing I thought about my grandma. I would think about my dad, but in a different shape and form, because I have grown and I have opened up more. But even though I still miss him, the way I would miss him if I wouldn't see him, you know, every 2 days or something. But, you know, I see a lot of hummingbirds all the time, and I kind of take it that it's him talking to me. And but I don't warn him because he just left to another room.
He's right there. Talk to him.
Yes.
He's right there. Just all you got to do is talk to him.
Yes. And every time I sit in my backyard, I just took a picture of a hummingbird. Every time I am here, there are hummingbirds around me, and they kind of like hang out, which is really cool.
That's him.
Where did you get that quote from? That teaching about the room? He just moved to the room next door. That we don't mourn when someone moves to another room.
What was the book? Ways of Mastery.
Ways of Mastery. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
All right, so we got to move on to the next paragraph, you guys, and I wanted to kind of give us time to talk about it, you know, and talk and answer Sandy's question, which we've definitely done that over the past 20 minutes. So let's, who is next, Claudia?
Is Debbie.
Debbie, yeah. All right, Debbie, take us
Okay.
on.
Okay. God's Son is indeed in need of comfort, for he knows not what he does, believing his will is not his own. The kingdom is his, and yet he wanders homeless. At home in God, he is lonely, and amid all his brothers, he's friendless. Would God let this be real when he did not will to be alone himself? And if your will is his, it cannot be true of you, because it is not true of him. I don't know what that means, so please don't ask me to give a perspective. I have to let it sink in first.
You want to give perspective? Okay, all right.
Let's give it some minutes, Debbie.
You're like, okay.
I'm going to go ahead and open that up to the group then, since Debbie doesn't want to.
Well, okay, hang on one second. The only thing I can link this to is the preceding paragraph where it says God's Son is you. So flipping it into this second paragraph is like we're in need of comfort because we know not what we do, believing it is not of our own. So the only comfort that we can get is from, because it goes back to that first paragraph, comfort comes from God's Son.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I can link it to. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. And to be honest with you, all of this stuff still has the same theme, that the bottom line is the saying that we don't know what's going on.
Right.
Okay? You just take it right back to lesson number 1. I don't know the meaning of anything. Okay? Again, you know, we're ascribing negative values to everything that's happening, everything from the coronavirus to, you know, how we look at ourselves. Everything is coming from a skewed perception.
Right.
So that's basically what it is saying. It is saying God's Son is indeed in need of comfort, for he knows not what he does, believing his will is not his own. So believing that your will is not one with the Father, believing all these things that are false, your will is one with the Father, believing that he's not perfect, you are perfect, believing that he is somehow not enough, you are more than enough, right here, right now, and forevermore, you will always be more than enough. Believing that there's something that you're lacking, you're lacking in nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So these are all negative, perceptually based images that we have of ourselves that create our experience, that create a negative experience. Okay? And so it's just a negative experience. And so there's still a lesson in that. Keep in mind, even if you're experiencing it not being in alignment, even if you're experiencing it from a state of lack, even if you're experiencing it from a state of being unworthy, there is still a beautiful lesson that's still involved. There's still going to be a beautiful lesson. Maybe it's not going to feel very beautiful, but when you get through it, when you get on the other side, it's going to be beautiful. So the only difference is if you can actually see the perfection right here and right now, understanding that you are enough, understanding that you are perfect, understanding that you are exactly as God made you to be. That creates a perception of heaven on earth, brothers and sisters. When you stop judging things about yourself, things that you just didn't quite make it. No, you didn't make it because you weren't supposed to make it. Period. If I could just, if I just would have remembered, you didn't remember this, make a different choice. That's all, but don't judge it. Don't, give yourself a pass. It's okay. And as you begin to give yourself a pass, keep in mind that there is an inside out healing. As you begin to be more loving with yourself and give yourself a pass and stuff like that, it will then begin to relate to how you relate to other people. You will begin to be more forgiving. You will begin to be more loving. As you treat yourself, you will treat your brothers and sisters. As you begin to perceive yourself, you will begin to perceive your brothers and sisters. This is not hard, brothers and sisters. This is not hard. But first and foremost is you. There is nothing out there. So I'll get down off of my soapbox now. Okay?
Yeah, I'd say a couple things in the course here. The Antichrist, that's on page 619. It talks about idols, and then we have so many idols, and it might be another person that we idolize, and it really gets into just what is an idol, and why do we have so many idols, and this really pulls us away from who we really are. And I guess it's the ego at work that's always trying to say, don't you want to do this? The temptations of Christ, like turn this rock into bread, that kind of
Does
thing.
that include chocolate?
No. That says excluding, right here, excluding chocolate.
Thank you.
Oh boy. Oh man, that's funny.
All right. So any other interpretations of paragraph 2?
Basically just saying nothing wrong happens.
Nothing wrong happens.
Nothing wrong happens.
There you go.
It's perfect.
Nothing wrong happens. Now keep in mind, I want you guys to keep something in mind, that there are a lot of people that are experiencing pain due to the, what maybe they've lost some loved ones and things like that, as far as with the coronavirus. So I wouldn't say that nothing wrong happened to them. So it's important to have compassion, be empathetic. If I lost somebody due to the coronavirus or anything, I don't want somebody coming to tell me that nothing wrong happened. But it's still an understanding, a good understanding to have in all things, not just the coronavirus, in all things. As far as in all things that you do and all sorts of things. And something, if you want to make a different choice, then fine, but just don't judge it. Don't judge it as something less than, because you don't know the impact that someone else experienced from what you thought was a less than decision or act or something like that. And you don't know how they experienced God through you. You have no idea. You have no idea.
Here, Stephen, I wanted to just mention something along with what you were saying earlier, that we just don't. Our first mistake is we've mistaken who we are. And from that mistaken, I call it a seat in the house, we see everything else mistakenly, because we're mistaken. We're looking through a set of glasses that we don't even know we're looking through. It's just we're seeing what's past them, and all from that mistake we have with ourselves. But I was thinking of this lesson, and this lesson is repeated 3 times. It's the only lesson that's repeated in the workbook, and it's I am as God created me. And it says, we will repeat today's idea it says, this one thought would be enough to save you and the world if you believe that it is true, period. Right there. Right there.
Yeah, that's the point I was making. Thank you so much. You keep on quoting those lessons, Bill. I appreciate you.
Well, that one is repeated 3 times. It's the only thing that's repeated. So the guy who put this down thought it was that important to keep repeating. And here's in the next place that lesson is, it says, this single thought held firmly in the mind would save the world, period. This single thought that I am as God created me. And love doesn't create anything but love, can't create anything but love. Perfection can't extend itself in anything but perfection. Wholeness, that's what we are. You know, and period.
Period. And it is only our thought that we are not that has us looking at this whole thing, including ourselves, because we really have to look at ourselves first as far as being perfect. And as we begin to see ourselves as perfect and stop judging ourselves like that, then you will see it will begin to relate to the world that you experience. You will begin to see perfection in the entire world. But first you have to begin to see perfection in yourself. And it just doesn't work any other way. Doesn't work any other way. I wish it did. I wish it could work the way you want it to work, or maybe the way I want it to work, or maybe we could just have a different kind of way to make it work. But it doesn't. We have to begin to see perfection in ourselves if we want to be able to see perfection in the world. So thank you, Bill. So are we ready to move on to paragraph 3, or we want to talk about 2?
Reverend Sheila, you were muted. We couldn't hear you. You're muted.
I didn't mute me. My son must have muted me.
I haven't
what power.
Because I can't see well enough to mute myself. But there's a woman in California who did recordings of several of the Course in Miracles lessons. And she did this one. I am as God created me. I am the light in this world. I am as God created me. I am. And I'll find her name so you can search for her music.
Yeah, that's the action verb, am.
Mm-hmm.
Or E, the action. This was written in the 70s. Preface was written in 1977. It's like, the Vietnam War, and God says, okay, I got to put something out there that gets people on the right track. Mm-hmm. And this Helen,
I know.
He didn't let them rest. He didn't really want to do it, but oh no, I'm talking to you, and you better start writing it down.
And I love that an atheist was picked.
Yeah. And yeah, it's amazing. The autobiography and the biographies of these two people are really something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Zeba, can you hear me? Zeba?
Yes. Hi.
How you doing? You've been a little quiet. How you doing?
I know. Yeah.
Are you able to?
Thank you for noticing.
Are you able to read paragraph 3 for us?
Sure. And denial is as total as love.
Paragraph 3.
Is that correct?
No, we're.
Oh my child.
Oh,
my child. Yeah.
Pardon? What page?
Oh my child. Yeah, we're in from darkness to light. Oh my child.
I'm sorry.
Page 199.
All right. And paragraph 3 again?
Yes.
Oh, my child?
Hmm?
Oh, my child. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, my child, if you knew what God wills for you, your joy would be complete. And what he wills has happened, for it was always true. When the light comes and you have said, God's will is mine, you will see such beauty that you will know it is not of you. Out of your joy, you will create beauty in his name. For your joy could no more be contained than his. the bleak little world will vanish into nothingness, and your heart will be so filled with joy that it will leap into heaven and into the presence of God. I cannot tell you what this will be like, for your heart is not ready. Yet I can tell you and remind you often that what God wills for himself, he wills for you. And what he wills for you is yours.
Wow.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Zeba. What do you think about that, Zeba?
You're welcome. Oh, well, I hear that well, you know, the part that says, when the light comes and you have said God's will is mine, you will see such beauty. I mean, from here on, it's just, it's so beautiful. You know, prophecies about what will happen after that. So the important thing is for me to realize that God's will is mine and my will is God's. It's like the same thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's no separation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is the important nail on the head. That is the important thing. You know, anybody else want to expound on any of that? Anybody else have any other interpretations of that? Anybody have any questions, any comments?
I just wanted to read sentence 6 again. I cannot tell you what this will be like, for your heart is not ready. It's that good.
Yes.
It's just that good. Love it.
Yeah,
But
that's why we're here. You know, we hope our heart will open and we'll learn and we'll realize that I just see flickers of that kind of thing.
But Miss Sandy, but right across the page, right there, it says, if you offer him a little place, just a little place, that makes me happy. It's like I can just get a little piece of that joy, just by giving a little bit of that space to that Holy Spirit. That's fine.
And I've had glimpses of it too, just that sense of perfection and joy and light. I've had it. Sometimes I want to grab it so I can keep it.
So I want you all to imagine all of the little things that you did just today. Little conversations. And I want you to imagine how those conversations that you had with whoever you had them with were perfect, were just the prescription that they needed. And perhaps it was an impact in your conversation with them that impacted their conversation with someone else. And perhaps that impacted their conversation with someone else. And you have no idea how far of a ripple you created. And you ascribed a value of something other than a miracle to that little conversation, you know, based on your vantage point of your perceptions. Okay?
Yeah.
But again, you are a living miracle. You have no idea how far-reaching all of your godly acts are, and how many people you impact, and some of which have not even been born yet. So just remember that when you judge yourself, or say that you are less than, or place any value other than divinity on an aspect of you. Just remember that.
Yeah, God said where everyone is special, but no one is special. And I said that, I actually wrote a poem. And the person that read it liked the poem, but he didn't understand that. He said, wait a minute. You said, everyone's special, but no one is special? He didn't get it. But that's it, you know. It's like, yeah, we're not going to put ourselves above anyone. We're all
one anyway, right?
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. And that, you know, that concept we're so used to through our course of our lives of thinking as a body and one person and everybody's, you know, individual. Yeah.
I think even now it's not even just face to face saying words with people, but there's all this opportunity out of just not even being in presence, like you're saying, people who haven't been born yet, or just it's like our mind can't maybe even comprehend this virtual reality of love.
Right.
It's so it's spreads like our prayers, our every thought is impacting. I think somewhere it says if you just still your mind for 5 minutes, you can heal 1,000 people or raise somewhere in here. And like our consciousness in love is healing, or, you know, we don't maybe necessarily have to go out there and find people to, you know, it's like being guided, you know. I think my old life was so much about producing and, you know, and having to perform or whatever. It's so ingrained in that system that is here, that it's like this thought system, I think it's just so not of this world that it's like, well, it's like it's another possibility, all these other ways that we can help heal each other, heal ourselves, that happen through these a lot of means, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, you know, again, I just want you all to keep that in mind. And if you ascribe any aspect of yourself other than divine, anything, I don't care what it is, any habit, anything like that, then perhaps you just have some work to do as far as, you know, as far as working on your conscious perception of yourself, because that is how wonderful you are. And so don't think that I'm blowing smoke or I'm somehow just, you know, saying a bunch of lofty words. That is the truth of who you are. That is who you are. That's what the Course in Miracles is saying. That's what it's saying. You know, if you really want to infer the meaning, it's basically saying, you know, it's just saying, you know, this is who you are. You're already perfect.
Yeah.
You know, so you don't have to think that you're going to be perfect when you die. You know what I mean? We're not, you know, you don't have to think you're going to be perfect as like this light, you know, without a body, and then you're going to be perfect. No, it's trying to say that you're already perfect. The only thing is your concept of it. Your concept, your self-image is what sees imperfection. Other than that, you're perfect, but you're looking through the lens of imperfection. You have lenses on right now. And so A Course in Miracles is just basically trying to teach all of us, you know, how to clean up the lens. You know, how to get that little mud or whatever that's on the lens that has us looking on a dark world. That's all it's doing. It's not telling us to change or anything like that. It's telling us really just to change our perception. Not telling us to be more good, you know, or to walk around like things don't impact us and stuff like that. But you know something? Things are not really going to be impacting me if I realize that I'm perfect already. I'm not going to feel attacked and stuff when somebody says something, because if I'm already perfect and I have a conscious realization I'm already perfect, there's nothing that you can do to make me feel less than. There's nothing that you can do. Even if you were to attack me with words, I'm already perfect, just as I am. So if I have a conscious realization of it within myself, there is nothing in the outside world that would ever impact me. Just an idea, just a thought.
You know, Stephen, I love what you said. You used the word imagine. Imagine this, yourself as this. And I use that word kind of in course terms. When the course calls us being asleep or hallucinating, it uses the word. Or we've imagined a whole world founded on untruth about what we are. You know, and I was at a Course in Miracles conference some years ago, and I met a man there, a course student, and he was retired, I guess, around then, but he was a hypnotherapist his whole life. And we talked about this idea, you know, being under a trance, or, you know, we're under this belief system. And I'll never forget, he said, you know, a really good hypnotist does not hypnotize you. A really good hypnotist dehypnotizes you, because you've already been hypnotized and you don't know it.
There you go. There you go.
We live under that spell. You know, the course uses different language, but that's basically what it is. We live it. The course uses the word world. That's the world you live in. It's the conditioning of the mind. You don't even know you're in it, because you're a character within the world you've created. And the course is trying to gently awaken you from that.
Absolutely.
That's powerful, because the idea of a hypnotist is the power of suggestion. And if we are asleep, then there are all these suggestions that are being, you know, that we're getting inundated with, and we believe the suggestion. So I really like that, you know, that comment, because that's what hypnotists do, the power of suggestion. If you're not open to it, there's nothing they can do to manipulate or get you, you know, the showman hypnotists get you to do silly things. But if you're not open to it, so, you know, that's a metaphor for the course, that if you're close with God, nothing will touch you. There are no suggestions that can manipulate you. The idea, though, or the trick is, or the lesson is to wake up.
Thank you, Sandra. And so this concludes A Course in Miracles. So I'm going to ask the Reverend Sheila Gautreaux to lead us in a closing prayer. Will you do that, Mother?
I would be delighted.
May I interject one thing? I have a singing bowl that's really nice for meditation. I could start us off with that at some point.
Okay.
I like that. Sure. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sheila.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let us come into that center place of our being, that heart, that core. Let's focus our energy on our hearts. And as we focus our energy on our hearts, we know that love expands. It increases. It begins to express. It moves forward. And so as we close out our wonderful Course in Miracles group tonight, we go forward bringing love to the world, bringing love into our own lives, bringing love into our nation, bringing love into the world, because only love is real. And we go forward as guides, directing our own paths and being an example in directing the paths of others as we remember who we are and whose we are. And we stand in truth, and we shift our perceptions from what we are witnessing to the truth of our being, of what we know is the truth. And we hold that. We hold that despite the difficulty in doing so and the challenges in doing so. And so we go forward with an intention to bless the world. And we send that intention out so that even before we begin to walk through this valley of the shadow of death, our intention is already felt. So we thank you for this amazing group. We thank you for all of this brilliance, this wisdom, and these highly evolved perceptions. Go before us, preparing our way for success. And as we move through our lives, let us know, what would you have us do? Where would you have us go? What would you have us say, and to whom? We are willing to do your will. Just tell us in a way that we will understand. And so it is, for it could not be otherwise.
Mother. Well, you guys, thank you for another wonderfully illuminating evening. It has been such a joy for me to spend time with you all. This is truly a powerful group.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Thank you.
Talks to everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for blessing
Thank
us.
you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank
Amazing.
you.
I'll see you guys next week.
Yes. Love you guys.
All right.
Have a
Bye.
fabulous week.
Yes.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.